Okay, let's go ahead and transition to these agricultural revolutions, and still in our second part here of Food Day, and just to get an idea of what had changed over time with regard to how food was produced and how we got to where we are today. So we see here that obviously domesticating seeds, domesticating plants has got to be really, the first thing that you're doing here. Barley or excuse me, wheat, barley, rye, these kinds of grain crops from uh, what would become Mesopotamia, land between the rivers in modern day Iraq, the Tigris and Euphrates, uh, and then domestication of animals too. Dogs are first; that's why they're man's best friend. But that we get to animals that both provide food, companionship, products we need. Meat, food, obviously, fleece or leather or the organs, the fat rendering for soap or candles. All these kinds of things come from this. So a vitally important aspect is the taming or the domesticating of wild plants and animals. So, oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. So there is I love this map. It has so much depth and detail to it. We obviously aren't going to go over every part of it, or even just a little bit of it, actually. So when you look in one of the major grain crops, wheat, rice, corn. These are the principal crops that provide a lot of calories for most people around the world. Now, in some places, that maybe they're using potatoes, yams, other tuber crops, uh, manioc, for instance, in the Caribbean area and so forth. But certainly seeds that have been domesticated, like sunflowers, certainly pulses, beans for protein. Big parts of that, leafy greens, of course, and certainly lots of fruits that are out there that have been domesticated as well. But I'm going to make a point about this that all of us could live a very healthy and probably better lifestyle if we only consume plant materials and not animal materials. So, if that interests you, take a look through the blueberries and eggplants and the cherries and think these things because it's it's a varied diet you could have. The problem is that you don't have a varied diet right now. You're not eating lots of different things. You're really eating only from a couple of major groups of plants, and then that's it. And it's easy to get bored with that. So expand your mind. Go to farmers markets and foreign restaurants, and you'll see lots of different kinds of things. Uh, chickpeas and couscous are just from the seas. Okay, go eat some of that stuff. All right, agricultural revolution's the second one here. Inputs and improvements in outputs, like how livestock is used, moving from say oxen to horse and draft horses, obviously not just regular old horses. Breeds of horses, specifically designed to be yoked and pull a plow. That you have a plow, for instance, that you have something to turn the ground with, that you have eventually crop rotation, that field drainage and or ways in which to water or irrigate fields. So many of these different things in this second agricultural revolution that come along are vital to really bumping up the amount of calories that are produced in any given area at any given time. If we go one step further, we really start to see chemicals and science and industry coming into the fore. Mechanization, like tractors, combines, airplanes, for goodness sakes, that are going to crop dust or things like this. GPS is being used. Chemical farming, of course, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. And so when we see the the pesticides and herbicides, do understand that you're spraying something on the plant you're going to eat that's intended to kill things that would eat it. Did you process that? So this person that you see in the picture here that's spraying these chemicals is very likely going to be affected by those chemicals and probably isn't wearing the correct protective equipment. And we saw even back in the 1960s when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring that DDT, which was a wonderful pesticide, also had incredible impacts in the environment to where it nearly wiped out the symbol of America, the American bald eagle. It the accumulation of DDT in the food chain turned into one where the eggs from the eagles, when born, were very thin, and just by the mother sitting on the clutch to warm them and then eventually hatch them, she crushed them. And so we saw a steep decline in that bird population. That's just one simple example. If we see some other issues here too, pardon me, to kind of build upon that, first let me say we have ingenuity and can come up with fertilizers like nitrogen. So we could just take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixate it down to nitrates, which we can then put on plants and they will grow in abundance. But with most of these things, too little. There's a fine line between enough, just the right amount to too much. And so what you're going to see on the map is that in excessive usage, you're going to see some real problems. So look at China. China, to feed 1.3 billion people, has been dumping that stuff out there. America, not much different. Mexico too, in these places that are using lots of nitrates. Middle Chile, for instance, or northern Venezuela, as you're looking on the map. India, Pakistan, northern Europe. Using way too much, and you could get the same kind of output without the negative effects that would come along with that. Certainly places across the developing world in parts of Asia, certainly Africa and South America, not enough nitrates. So it'd be nice if we had more systematic version of this. But before you start dumping on farmers too much, understand that lots of people that are lawn worshipers put way too much on their grass just to make it look green. That stuff runs off into the waterways after every big rain, and all of this ends up washing down to places where there are dead zones. And so if you look along the Gulf Coast, up around Chesapeake Bay, the eastern seaboard, where a lot of these rivers like the Hudson and others are dumping out into the Atlantic Ocean, what do you find? You find that the water is hypoxic. That means things can't live in there in low oxygen, and so it might be okay for fish that can swim out of the area, but what about clams and shellfish and other things that move so slowly that can't? And you really see some serious problems around where you have these dead zones, certainly all around Europe, Japan, the more developed countries. You see it around Sydney in Australia, Auckland and Wellington in New Zealand. But eutrophication, the opposite is oligotrophic. Oligotrophation. So the difference is that you get too much nutrients in the water, then the cyanobacteria develops. They can also be, it says here, certainly blue-green algae, but you can also get red tides from this. And so these are going to be human-made problems in trying to boost food production. So there has to be a better way of doing this. And so in some ways there are. If we did look at genetically modified organisms, they're not a panacea. They have their own problems that come along with it, from pest resistance and some other things. But if you look in here at the age of industrialization within agriculture, we go well beyond just the producing of food. Production, storage, processing, distribution, marketing, retailing, all of that goes into this major system. And one of the problematic things, too, is that food wastage. You go into your local grocery store and look at the chickens and stuff they already have baked out there for you. But if those things don't sell within an hour or so, they get thrown away. Billions of pounds of food wasted every year. I'm going to speed up here, though, so I don't spend too much time on this. But if we look in at what the Earth looks like from the impact of it, this is in Panhandle of Texas. You can see the square counties that they used, but then look at the circles, which are these crop circles are at the center of each one of these is a well. And so this is tapping into the Ogallala Aquifer. And as you see, as we get closer and closer, what is it going to turn into? It's going to turn into a feedlot. So this is not a good use of the water. It's not a good use of the land. It's not a good situation for the animals. So when we look at water efficiency and production, where's it better? Obviously with plants. It's worse with beef cattle. So essentially take it from the biggest animals that you can use. It's the worst for. Go down to pork and goats. That's another thing. Chickens going down the line, but if you just stick with poultry, with eggs, that is, and soy, much better off. Look at soy and usable protein per acre of farmland. Beef all the way down at the bottom end, with soy being at the top end. We use corn and rice and soy to feed the cattle. Why not just skip that step and lets us eat it? And you see lots of plant-based alternatives. I don't necessarily agree with always having to have, call it chicken or call it a burger. That doesn't even make sense to me. But protein patties are fine, and I know they're trying to market to people who are used to eating meat. So, okay, if that's what it takes, but I don't necessarily agree that it still has to be an animal for you to enjoy it. My final argument here is that we should really be considering lots of other kinds of things to eat as well. Pardon me. And so one of the things that doesn't look very good at all to eat, if you're not so interested in, say, soybeans, tofu, for instance, or spirulina is much better, but I wonder if you would even want to eat spirulina. Spirulina is really good for amount of protein. The way it grows very easily in the water. Now you're thinking, oh, now I have to eat pond scum? And I'll get that until you see that it's processed, okay? Until you see that it's processed. And so I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's processed here in just a moment, but consider spirulina. Also consider bugs. And I know it sounds weird, but to be honest with you, I've eaten these things. Now, I'm not going to go off and say here that I eat houseflies or waxworms or any of that sort, but I've certainly had, mealworms and crickets. And if you think, oh, God, that sounds so nasty, well, they don't have wings and heads and all that other kind of stuff. Their legs are gone. It's like eating a bowl of peanuts, and they're nice and seasoned. And see, that's a problem. A lot of people start to think about eating raw worms and raw this, but you don't think about eating a raw cow. You don't just walk out and bite the cow in the bum and say, yummy, right? No, you process it and you cook it and you put stuff on it so it tastes good. So you would do it with this stuff as well. So this would be the raw form of it. And mind you, that if I'm telling you to eat bugs or whatever, you're already eating bugs. Look at the note here. It's in peanut butter, it's in chocolates, it's in oregano. You're already eating insects. Okay? Get past the mind blockage here and say, look, oh, okay, here's what spirulina can be cooked up as. And if you see this stir fry, you can see the mealworms right in there with the egg and with the onion. I'm sure this tastes really good, and there's your basis of protein. So I doubt that I would change your mind fully, but hopefully I've opened your mind to the possibilities of what we can do to change how we produce food, and minimize the impact that we have on the environment. Certainly consider the role of workers that have to work menial jobs, long hours, and dangerous at times. What about the health of the animals and the living conditions of these animals? There's a lot of inherent problems with it that you don't see that I've made you aware of. So hopefully in the food production system, this will get you thinking differently about how you go about your daily diet and your daily life, and maybe that'll eventually have an impact in a positive way on nature from using less fossil fuels for greenhouse gas, less impacts on the environment all the way around. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'll catch up with you again in the next topic, okay?